welcome everybody to Pulse of Fins Nation. I am your host, Louis Song. I am joined today by Chris Early, otherwise known as Duke. I am joined by Eric Weideke, and today we have a recurring guest here, Chad Ronnebaum, a good friend of mine who's been on the show in the past, and we are going to talk Odell Beckham Jr. today. That's going to be the main topic of discussion here, and for once, it's not all going to be just an agreeing fest. We're actually going to have some disagreements here, because I know that at least a couple of people on this panel were looking at the OBJ signing and being like, not really into it. So you already know where I stand. I'm not going to say who stands where. We're just going to go ahead and let the chips fall as they may. We'll get into that in just one moment. But before that, really quick, as always, we have to talk about our sponsors for this show. We're going to start with our good friends over at PrizePicks.com. PrizePicks.com is the revolutionary fantasy platform where you can pick up to 6 different players across professional sports leagues, whether that is the NFL, the NBA, the MLB, one of each. It's up to you to decide. All you have to do is choose the over or the under on your lineups, and you'll be good to go. You can pick from any different kinds of sports, like I said. And if you are in Florida, they have this new arena mode where you have the option of either picking up to, I believe, 4 different players across the leagues. And once you do that, you can either win by getting all 4 of them correct, or you can be the best one out of the group of people they put you in. So that's what makes it different. So once again, you can use Prize Picks in Florida. So for those of you who have not already done so, you can once again use the promo code 5, that's FIVE, and they will match up to $100 on your deposit when you sign up. So don't delay, go to prizepicks.com and get started winning today. And of course, we also have a brand new sponsor. If you have not already checked it out yet, you definitely should. I'm going to play the video for you. It's for jerseys305.com.
Hey, it's Ethan Skolnick for the 5 Reasons Sports Network. We've got a great new sponsor that fits with us perfectly. It's called jerseys305.com. That's jerseys305.com. This is your home for dead stock and vintage jerseys from the Heat, Panthers, Dolphins, Marlins, and the other local teams. Their mission was born from a passion for wearing jerseys of the old styles and the past players. Jerseys 305 aims to make every fan stand out from the crowd with unique pieces that you don't commonly see anymore. Maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago, but not today. And Jerseys 305 was created by the fans, for the fans. They're diehards just like you. In fact, they're probably listening to this episode right now. So check them out, Jerseys 305, their partnership with 5 Reasons Sports, celebrating with a 10% discount on the next purchase using the code 5 at checkout. Unlock your exclusive savings on the entire vintage collection.
Once again, that's Jerseys 305. Use our promo code 5. You get 10% off your purchase. All right. So I'm going to save my thoughts for a little bit later on. I don't want to be the main person doing all the talking. In fact, I don't think either of you guys have been able to actually open your mouths yet. I apologize for that. So I'm going to go ahead and start with our guest for the show, Mr. Ronnebaum. The Miami Dolphins signed Odell Beckham Jr., very low base price, and then there's a ton more money he can make in incentives. So all in all, however you slice it, it's a very team-friendly deal in that regard. But what are your thoughts on the Odell Beckham Jr. signing? Do you like it? Do you hate it? Do you see the vision here? What are you thinking?
I definitely don't hate it, and I wouldn't say I like it either. But I mean, it's hard to argue with the price there for $3 million plus incentives. That's a pretty low dollar contract for a number 3 wide receiver. I don't know what the incentives are, like what he has to hit to get them. So I like that from the standpoint what he's been over his career from a talent standpoint, and he's being brought in to be a number 3 receiver in depth. I do like that aspect of it. The aspects I don't like, I mean, Odell Beckham's 31. He hasn't really done anything in the NFL relevant for quite a few years now, at least 3 or 4 seasons. I know he's had a lot of injuries he's had to overcome, but I just see him as like, what does he really have left in the tank sort of thing? And I also couldn't quite wrap my head around the plan with it when we drafted the 2 Washingtons in the draft. I really liked Malik Washington's tape. I think he could be a pretty good number 3. And I know with what Mike McDaniel likes to do, he likes to rotate groups in and out so that, you get, let's say you're going into a game plan with 50 plays, for example, that you want to run in that game, like your 50 preferred plays. He likes to kind of break down groups. And so Devon Achane is going to be really good at 10 of those plays, and Raheem Mostert's going to be really good at 10. And when the receivers come in, that's where he'll put somebody like River Craycraft really good at 10, Braxton Barrows really good at 10. And so could Odell do really well in that? Sure. Is Odell going to be willing to do it? And I highly question that. I think the guy has a really large ego personally. I think he thinks extremely highly of himself. And I don't see him coming in at a $3 million contract where he has to get his hands on the ball to make his money and be willing to be a guy that's probably only going to get, maybe 2-3 targets a game and not really be a focal point of this offense. This offense has a lot of people to cycle through in a lot of different formations. Bringing in Janu Smith is going to change a little bit of the formations we run, and they're going to, I think, utilize the tight end more than they did last season, which means the number 3 wide receiver may not be as big of a focal point in this offense. And so when I started looking at all the bodies we have in camp and the way they'll probably get utilized, I'm concerned that he'll be more of a problem than a benefit when it comes to locker room maybe type stuff. Is he going to be trying to push Tua to get more targets, things like that? Because he's definitely not being brought in to be a featured wide receiver. I mean, that's Waddle and Hill all the way. And I don't know how he'll fit with that. And then earlier in the season, I know I wasn't as concerned about guard, but right now we're looking at Robert Jones and Liam Eichenberg probably being the primary 2 candidates competing at right guard. And I liked the way Isaiah Wynn played last year, but the reality is with that guy, he hasn't had a healthy season in quite a while either. So I think expecting Isaiah Wynn to have a full 17, 18 games at left guard is probably wishful thinking as well. And so I could easily see within a game or an injury or two where we have some concern at the interior level of our offensive line. And so when I see a guy like Dalton Resner out there signed for, I think, $4 million last year with Minnesota, and that's the money they just gave Odell, I'm looking at it like, how much does Odell Beckham help this offense versus that being Braxton Barrows or Malik Washington or Eric Exukoma or River Craycraft versus Dalton Reisner over Robert Jones or Dalton Reisner over Liam Eichenberg. And I think there's a much more sizable gap at the guard talent right now than the number 3 wide receiver talent.
So it's not so much that you don't like the Odell thing, it's that you don't like that they signed Odell over going and signing Dalton Reisner.
Well, and I honestly don't know if there's some history. I mean, if anybody knows Dalton Reisner, it'd be Butch Barry. He coached him when they were in Denver, and that didn't go over too well. But as I look at the market right now for guards, not knowing what's going to shake free after the cuts start happening, he's the only one out there I see that looks like a clear upgrade over what we have.
Greg Van Roten is right guard. He's a little on the older side, but old
we
guys
probably
still
should consider him as if anything for depth. But I looked at the stats a day or two ago over that, and I think he gave up 5 sacks I think last year, and Reisner gave up 1 or 0. So I think Reisner performed at a quite a bit higher level. But either way, yeah, I think one of those guys needs to be brought in. And I know we have the June 1st money coming from Xavier Howard yet, but I'm just concerned because I just think right now we're looking at a interior offense that's designed to be really good at pulling, doing a lot of those zone stretch strikes runs that McDaniel has. But if we're getting blown up in the middle of the field, it gets really hard at times to operate much of an efficient offense if you have defensive tackles blowing up the middle. And, we're going up against Quinnen Williams, Ed Oliver. They Buffalo and Jets defensive fronts are very good. And our weakest point of the team right now, which is a very good team overall, is our interior offensive line. So I know that's a little different topic. What's that have to do with Odell? I wanted to see that addressed, but maybe it still will. Then that's great.
Eric, let's hear from you, sir.
Yeah, so the thing about Odell that I like, and I will just throw one more name into that guard rotation. I think we're looking at Jack Driscoll maybe being a legit competitor for that right guard spot if they don't intend on using him as a swing tackle. As far as Odell goes, it's a matter of the traditional stats really kind of more versus the underlying analytics on a guy like Odell. He had 35 receptions last year. If you look at how many of those were first downs or touchdowns, 30 of his 35 receptions either went for a first down or for a touchdown. So at the very least, this is a guy who shows that he's still a trusted weapon for a quarterback. When Lamar Jackson needed somebody in the red zone or he needed somebody to pick up a first down, he knew that he could trust Odell. And then there are some really interesting numbers that kind of show that maybe, there's still some juice with Odell. You look at, his yards after catch per reception is the highest that it's been since 2018 with the Giants. He averaged 16.1 yards per reception last year. This is a guy that's, while yes, he might be a problem in the locker room, and that's why I think getting him at $3 million is a great investment, because of the fact that, if there are problems, you can relatively easily wash your hands of the situation and kind of be done with that. The thing about Odell is, I guess it's more the idea of Odell Beckham Jr. rather than maybe what you get on the field. Whereas defense is just another guy that defenses are going to have to respect, whether or not he still really, deserves it or not. He's still got that name where, I still think it's in the back of defenders' minds or the back of defensive coordinators' minds that, this is still a guy that's going to be a threat, whether he's a decoy or whether he's actually utilized in the offense effectively. The other thing here is I think he gives them another option to play on the outside and gives them a little bit more flexibility to move Tyreek Hill or Jalen Waddle into the slot, where I'm really intrigued to see them a little bit more often this year. So overall, while I understand the concerns on the offensive line, I do think ultimately for the investment that you're giving it, guaranteed $3 million. I think the upside is worth the $3 million investment in any downside, because worst case scenario, you burn $3 million cutting the guy.
All right, Duke, let's hear it.
So I was a fan of the signing. I know we talked about that a little bit at the end of the show last week. I think that he's going to be a good fit. If you look at the Dolphins last season, I've got some stats pulled up here. Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle had 275 targets apiece, or total, between the two of them. The next highest target getter was Durham Smythe, had 43 targets. So you need a guy in there that's going to get to get some more targets. It looks like that Berrios and Cedric Wilson had about 71 targets between the two of them. So what the benefit is there is you get a guy who's a proven talent who can still make – he's not necessarily the prototypical outside big receiver that's going to be like a power forward jump ball type guy, but he's a guy that can win in contested catch situations. He's a guy that can win across the middle. As Eric said, he's a guy that can play give you some versatility with your other two guys. And the other benefit that no one's mentioned is this takes pressure off guys like Malik Washington, who I'm a fan of, and I think he's going to make the squad, and I think he's going to be wide receiver 2 or 3 at some point on this team. But that takes pressure off of him to step in and be a major contributor right away. Despite the fact that we like him, he is still a 6th-round pick and a rookie. So it's going to be a learning curve for him. And he plays primarily in the slot. So my expectations for Odell would be that I look at it, I think 60 catches, 800 yards, and 5 touchdowns is a reasonable expectation for a wide receiver 3 in this offense. That's slightly over 5 or so targets a game, assuming he catches somewhere around 60% of the targets. First 3 years of his career, he had a really high catch percentage, and then it has dropped off since then. He's been in the 50s. I don't know if that's a product of how they're using him or what it is, but assuming he catches about 60% of the passes that are thrown to him, if he gets 5 targets a game, he's going to end up around 60 catches. So he gives you a proven weapon, a guy that defenses still have to honor when they try to take away the other guys. And if something happens and one of those guys are out, remember Jalen Waddle, I think, missed the last 2 games of the year. Hill missed the game last year. It gives you a guy that can still demand attention that allows other players to do stuff. So the question would be, I don't think he's a locker room issue per se, but the question is going to be if he thinks he can get the money from the incentives and he's close, is he going to, want the ball? But on the same token, I don't think you sign with the Dolphins, and I believe I read that it was reported he was offered more money with from the Bills and the Chiefs to go play for them, and he still chose Miami. So I think knowing that you're going to come here and you're going to play third fiddle behind Hill and Waddle, you know that you're not going to necessarily get the volume that you were expecting to get in other places. You go to Buffalo, he might be wide receiver 1 because they have young guys and a rookie that's going to be their number 1 target. They don't really have any proven outside receivers. He goes to Kansas City. I read today that Rashee Rice is in more legal trouble. They've got some guys. He would be there. He would go there and be like their number 2 target behind Kelsey, possibly. So he came to Miami knowing that he's not going to get the bulk of the targets, but at the same time, he's not going to get anywhere close to the defensive attention that he's going to get on other teams. He goes to Buffalo. They're going to eyeball him. They're going to focus their defense to him. He comes to Miami. He's a guy out there. And if you try to take away the other 2, he's your third option. And so I was thinking about it a little earlier this week, and I think that he's essentially we have him as a possession receiver. And if Odell Beckham Jr. is your possession receiver, you're doing pretty good.
All right, so I'll give my thoughts now, and after I'm finished, you guys can chime in, or if you guys want to interrupt, you guys know how I am about this show. Like, there's never anybody. It's like, oh, it's your turn, my turn, this turn. Like, by all means, do the first take thing. Jump in if you feel like it. But I feel like I'm a fan of the move. I feel like that with everything that Miami's got going on right now, I was the one who was screaming for a long time, and I want to have my cake and eat it too, because I was saying in the draft, I don't know if I want a guard or if I want a third wide receiver more. Ultimately, Miami got their third wide receiver after the fact in free agency. I get where Duke is coming from. I agree with him. And Chad, I think you also alluded to this as well. You like Malik Washington a lot. You think this kid is going to be really good. Something to keep in mind and remember is that this offense, Mike McDaniel's offense, is very difficult to learn right off the bat. You ask Eric Ezunkama, who he was told, we kept hearing, we kept wondering, where is Eric Ezunkama? Where is Ezunkama? We drafted this kid. He's supposed to be good. Where is Ezunkama? Wes Welker kept telling, nope, not ready yet. Nope, not ready yet. Nope, sorry, still not ready. And finally, last year, it looked like we were actually going to get to see him. He started playing well, got hurt. Oh, well, he'll get another shot this year. But the reality of the situation is that for young players who are coming in and learning the scheme for the first time, and especially if you're a rookie, I don't necessarily buy into the Malik Washington, oh, he was a 6th-round wide receiver. There were many, many people who had him graded as a 3rd or 4th rounder. And there were many people who were talking about, wow, the Dolphins got one hell of a steal by being able to draft him in the 6th round. So I will give that as a win for Greer for picking a quasi 3rd or 4th rounder in the 6th round. Same with Mo Kamara, but that's a different position. It gives the opportunity for Malik Washington and Taj Washington. We don't know what he can do. Like, is it all Caleb Williams or was there something there with him? So we'll get a chance to see. I feel like these young guys are going to need some time to build up the knowledge that is required to run this offense effectively. Of course, it's going to still run through Tyreek and Hill, Tyreek and Jalen Waddle. Of course, it's going to be through them still. They're the main, they're what makes this offense tick. And eventually, I don't know, because there's no way to truly, like Tyreek is irreplaceable. There's no physical way that you can truly replace Tyreek Hill. It's just not going to happen. Xavier Worthy was the closest thing to it. He has more straight line speed than Tyreek, you could argue. But Alf brought it up last week. Nobody moves in space like Tyreek does. Nobody. So Eventually, Miami will have to find some way to replicate that. I don't know if it's going to be through just paying Waddle and letting Tyreek walk, or finding a way to extend Tyreek because he says he wants to retire here, whatever the heck that means. Like, does that mean he's going to retire now? Is he going to retire later? I don't know. We'll see how long he sticks around. But the Odell Beckham Jr. move for me is indicative of they want the youth movement, but they also want to try to compete right now because the youth movement is what comes after. We're still competing. We're still trying to push for that Super Bowl run. And you unmuted, so I'm going to let you.
No, it's just, I mean, I understand that Mike McDaniel's offense is a little bit hard to grasp, but I mean, if there is any position that you can come into the NFL and acclimate right away, day one, and be an impact player, it is at wide receiver. Granted, I do think Malik Washington is going to be really good. I think he's going to make the team. Taj Washington is probably more of a practice squad guy in my eyes, just because I think that they have real quality in the top 6 receivers, especially now, adding a guy like Beckham. But, I don't know how much this really pushes off Malik Washington's development. I don't think that they would have a problem considering the investment at $3 million. That midway through the season, you might see Malik Washington out-snapping Odell Beckham Jr. And maybe that would be a problem. And if it is, like I said, minimal investment, you can find a way to cut that experiment short if it does become a problem. The other thing with Odell Beckham is, even if he's got an ego, I think even Odell would understand the guys ahead of him are Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. It's not like he's being brought in it's not like he's being brought into a place like Buffalo, like Duke referenced, and they want to make him their number 4 receiver behind Keon Coleman and Khalil Shakir and whoever the third guy in Buffalo is right now. It's a completely different situation. This is a guy that knows and respects the guys ahead of him on the depth chart. I don't think it's going to be an issue with the personalities, but like I said, for the investment, I think the reward that you get on the back end, and I mean, I'm not as bullish as Duke with the projections on the numbers there. I think that's maybe a little bit high given how much I anticipate them to get the tight end involved this year a little bit more in the passing game. I think maybe something a little bit more like 50 catches, 600 yards and 4 touchdowns is probably about right for a number 3 receiver, just because of how much Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill do command in this offense. But like I said, ultimately, really low risk maneuver, and I'm never going to be against a low risk maneuver on, at any position where you can add talent. And I still think post June 1st, a lot of the guys that are out there now are still going to be out there at that time. When the Xavier Howard money frees up, there will be more than enough money. If you want to go out and sign a veteran guard, they still have that option available to them. The whole theme of this offseason, it feels like, has been the Dolphins don't do something, we get impatient, and then eventually they get around to doing it. And I think that's kind of going to follow suit. I still think they will add another veteran offensive lineman somewhere down the road here in the offseason. So I don't know if it's necessarily a one or the other thing with adding a guard or another wide receiver for them.
Well, here's what I'll say to that. First, I'll address what I think Odell Beckham Jr.'s stat line should be. I do agree with you, Eric. I feel like Duke's projections are a little high. Think of it this way. In Baltimore, Odell Beckham basically became number 2 target. With all the injuries that they had to rely on Odell and a couple other young guys. That's what they had at the time. Because Mark Andrews was injured, so he wasn't an option. So they had to rely on Odell. With that in mind, as their number 2 target on the whole team, he put together 35 catches, 565 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Now, you can argue how much of that was just that Lamar Jackson is not the most accurate quarterback in the world. I don't think it's a crime to say that. I'm not saying he's a running back playing quarterback, but Lamar Jackson does have accuracy concerns. It's the one thing that holds him back. And I do mean the only thing at this point that holds him back. So with Odell, I watched the highlight reel. Like if you watch the highlight reel from last year with Odell, like you'd be surprised how many catches he makes where he has to really go out there to get that pass because the pass just is not where it's supposed to be. And that's probably highlighting one of the greatest things about Odell Beckham that, and ironically enough, this is a weak point of our first two targets. The one thing that Tyreek and Waddle, besides health issues, quote unquote, that is holding them back, they got butterfingers sometimes, man. Like we lost count of how many times we would get frustrated with Tyreek and Waddle. It's like, how do you manage to drop that? And like Tyreek dropped like what, 3 touchdowns last season, just on that alone. That killed us. We hated it. We were so pissed off about it because Tyreek single-handedly both won us games and lost us games, it felt like. So the one thing you can never, ever accuse Odell Beckham Jr. of being is loose with his hands. That man is like a vice. As soon as the ball's around, he's going to catch it. There's no question. So that's something that none of the other targets that Tua currently has can reliably say. Even with Tyreek and Waddle, there was always that hold your breath moment. It's like, is he going to catch it? And then most of the time we were relieved because, okay, he caught it. But there was always that one little itch that is like, you couldn't scratch it. It's like, is he going to catch it? And he does. Or then he doesn't. And then it's like, it feels like the whole world is ending. Odell Beckham doesn't drop passes. He just doesn't. It's practically not in his DNA. So that's what makes him probably one of the most reliable targets, at least, that Miami has to offer to it right now. And unlike Braxton Berrios and unlike guys like Malik Washington, like was already been alluded to, Odell can run outside. Braxton Berrios can't go outside. We saw it. They tried. Believe me, they tried. It didn't work. Like Braxton Berrios, every time you sent him outside, he was just not open. Like, don't even bother. It's a waste of a target. So it never worked. So we don't do that. With Odell, you can do stuff like that because he can actually run outside. Berrios can't. We don't know what Ezunkama can do. Ezunkama was being used as a Deebo Samuel of the offense, and then when his injury happened, they didn't look like they were really all that interested in trying to replace that. So they just let it go. Now we'll see what they do because Ezunkama is going to have to, he's going to have to compete with guys like Malik Washington, Taj Washington. He'll obviously have to compete with the likes of Odell Beckham for snap time now. We'll see what happens. Craycraft is around. They brought him back for a reason. They're not going to bring back Craycraft again and just kind of let him slide unless somebody turns out to be an elite level blocker. When Wes Welker comes out and literally says he could coach me on how to block as a wide receiver, that speaks volumes about what Craycraft's role in this offense is, and you can basically cement a spot on the roster for him right now. There's no denying that. So if I'm Miami, I'm feeling very good about my weapons core. Malik Washington will probably make the roster again just because a lot of people really like him and you don't want to risk him to the practice squad. Taj Washington, probably the odd man out. He'll probably make the practice squad, and that's fine. Ezunkama, you could probably stash on the practice squad. I don't know if anybody's willing to take a chance on him. But Odell Beckham, like everybody's already mentioned, he gives the Miami Dolphins an option that they didn't have last season, and that will help a lot. And that's not even counting Jonnu Smith, which that's a different discussion for another time. I like the move. I know the whole diva thing. I get it. I've heard it many, many times. I think, though, that there's some factors here that's going to tamper that down. Number one, Odell realizes that his market right now was not great. That's why he had to take the incentive-laden deal, because he was looking around. His agent was probably telling him, listen, dude, there's been more wide receivers drafted in this draft than has been in a very long time. All these guys are focusing on a youth movement. Look at Tyler Boyd. He just signed, what was it, a $4 million deal to go back to go to Tennessee with Brian Callahan, his old OC. Like, think about that. Tyler Boyd was supposed to get a payday, not a prove-it deal. And I know, Chad, you actually commented on that tweet that I sent out earlier today about that exact thing.
Yeah, I just made the point when you go late in free agency and you're a 30-year-old player, you're often are just going to get a rental deal, and that's what happened. I mean, obviously you don't know what offers like Tyler Boyd had maybe in March. You know, did he have like a $6 million deal on the table? And he didn't? Because I do think some players their ego a little bit gets in way of reality. And I'm using Xavier Howard is this right now because Xavier Howard's been paid, 15 plus million to 20 million for several years now, and he's used to that paycheck. And those days are gone. And I don't know that he actually realizes that yet. That he's going to get a somewhere between 5 or 10 1-year deal from somebody that said, all right, we didn't get the corner we wanted. We could plug maybe Xavier Howard in for a season until next year. That's all he is anymore. But because he was such a good player for so long, I don't know that he realizes that his career is about over. But that's, I think, hard for people to realize himself. And I think Tyler Boyd and Odell are in that similar situation. I think Odell's a smart man, and so Odell realizes there's more ways to make money than what your paycheck is in football. And I think, actually, I heard this from Chris Sims, who isn't my favorite by any stretch of the imagination, but I do listen to Pro Football Talk a lot of times because they're usually one of the first people to release information. And he said that Miami has become a destination, which that is something from an intangible thing you don't realize with Mike McDaniel and Odell Beckham. Is recruiting is part of the NFL, trying to get people here on favorable deals. And this offseason, you saw it. That's how you get a Poyer. That's how you get an Odell. These players coming in on $1 or $2 million deals because there's an actual real scene in Miami. You look at the F1 race yesterday and the people that are there at it. Mahomes is there, movie stars are there, and Odell Beckham is there. And Odell Beckham's all about that. I mean, he was just with Kim Kardashian, for crying out loud. So he's about what's going on off the field, from endorsements to media attention. And Miami's a mecca for that. If you want attention and you want to be at the scene where other celebrities are, Miami is a place to be. And so I think that is part of the reason Odell wanted to be here, was for those reasons, like that. But I think you guys all made valid points. I think when it comes to the third wide receiver, it's just that's the role. And I think that's probably what he was playing last year towards the end of the season with the Ravens. I think when they signed him last year for $15 million, I think a little bit of that was that off the field recruiting, and they wanted to get Lamar Jackson's contract all ironed out. So you throw Odell in as a guy he might enjoy playing with.
And I think Lamar was pushing for Odell too.
Yeah, that's what I mean. But by the end of the year, I mean, the number one was clearly Flowers on that offense. And I would say Bateman was the number 2 and Odell was 3. So maybe he'll be okay with that role. But, you get these games and, if you play a team that has 3 really good corners, but their linebackers aren't too slow, I mean, you're going to want, feature Janu Smith. You're going to want to feature maybe more formations with both Mostert and HN in the backfield. And so that 3 wide receiver, I don't know that set is going to be used all the time. And so you're going to have a game where Odell might only get, 2-3 touches the whole game, just based on what the matchups are and where you're winning at. And there's a lot of capable players on this team. And my personal opinion, after Waddle and Hill, the most dangerous player on our team is Devon Achane. I mean, that guy is special. And I think they're going to want to put the ball in his hands a lot this year if he's healthy. And I think Odell might be around a 4 or 5 option in terms of how often you're putting him in the ball. I don't really care if it's a tight end, a receiver, a running back. It's how you get in the ball in their hands. Because Mike McDaniel, of anybody I've ever seen, he doesn't care whether it's a handoff, a flip, this little screen, a 9 route down the field. He's just trying to get the ball into his playmakers' hands. And there's a lot of playmakers on this team that are ridiculously fast. We probably have 3 running backs right now that are faster than Odell Beckham right now in a foot race. And so I just don't know that he's going to get the ball a lot. And as long as he's okay with that and he understands that role, that there might be a game where we have a matchup and he's going to get, 7-8 catches in that game and have 100 yards. But there are going to be games where that's just not the matchup the number 3 is. And we saw that last year with Cedric Wilson. Cedric Wilson isn't a terrible wide receiver. There's just games where they didn't utilize him at all because the matchups just weren't there. And so
he didn't fit the scheme.
Well, you can say that, but when we get into those games, is McDaniel going to feel the pressure? Is Tua going to feel the pressure? Like, do we feel like we have to get the ball to Odell to keep him happy? And if that's the case, that makes me a little, well, I don't know about it. But if he's fine being a team player and understands there's going to be games where he's not much of a focal point, And he's good with that. He's just fine going in and, maybe being on the field 20-30% of the snaps and primarily being a blocker at those times, then great. But if he's going to be like causing problems over it, then it's counterproductive. Then that's kind of where I'm at.
Well, I'm gonna go ahead and bring up. So Florida man is mad at me for mentioning Butterfingers with Tyreek and Waddle. Like, listen, okay, maybe that's a little bit of a strong phrase to use, but you can't deny that they dropped a lot of passes in really bad moments. That's what I'm mostly talking about. That's why it gets so frustrating. So that's all I was saying, is that Odell Beckham has much more reliable hands than either Tyreek or Waddle. I don't think I dare you to find the clip where Odell Beckham Jr. drops an easy touchdown. I dare you. Go ahead and try. You won't find it.
I think Malik Washington also has very good hands. Both of those two do. They're probably better hands than Tyreek or Waddle, but they're not near the ability to get free. This is a side note. Drives me insane that Waddle jumps all the time to catch the ball. Like it's such a wasted motion.
He does. I hate that.
I know it's just his habit, but I wish that he could get away from, just get your hands out, get the ball, get your foot in the turf and go. But he likes to jump up the air and catch the ball. It's you lose all your leverage. You're off the ground. You're an easy target. But anyway, that's a side note.
Every time I see you unmute, Eric, I'm gonna assume you have something to say, bro.
No, I was waiting on Duke because I thought Duke he
does have a very thoughtful expression on his face.
He does have a very thoughtful. He's got something cooking up there. No, but I mean, going back to the Waddle point, it does rob him of a lot of yards after catch that he jumps up, because it just kills the momentum, and that's an extremely frustrating thing. The other thing about Waddle that I don't want to turn this into a Jalen Waddle hate stream. Let me just put that out there. I'm not just dumping on the guy to do that, but he is a little bit more of a body catcher, which I tend not to love, but again, Jalen Waddle, great receiver. Hope he stays around for a long time as the guy to, be the guy after Tyreek Hill. I mean, I guess I could just put a neat little bow on the Odell Beckham Jr. thing by saying, listen, where he is in the, on the offensive totem pole.
And not to mention his career at this point, Eric. Like, the man's getting into his 30s. I think he realizes he's not the guy anymore.
No, I get that. I get that. But what I'm saying is, like, that's completely up to him. Because if he comes into camp and there's a big separation and it's, oh man, Odell looks, maybe not like he did before, but if he looks like even the player that we saw in LA down the stretch in their Super Bowl run, all of a sudden, maybe then he really is the number 3 option and not behind guys like Jonnu Smith or Malik Washington. And I think Chad brings up a great point about Devon Achane. I think he's going to be more involved in the passing game this year, just because Mike McDaniel is going to be looking to find ways to get him the ball. I mean, ultimately, I think what we're talking about right now, these are all champagne problems. Right? Like, I think we can all admit that on the offensive side of the ball right now is we're talking about we have too many weapons to spread the ball around, and we don't know who's going to get squeezed out. Those are fantastic problems to be having on your football team. And, like I said, the Odell thing, it's just another veteran established guy to bring into the room. And if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. There's no harm, no foul.
When was the last time that you could say that about the Dolphins? Like, we've got too many mouths to feed. What are we going to do? I mean, I remember watching games with Lynn Bowden Jr. and Isaiah Ford and Mac Hollins, right? And now we're like,
we could say last year that we had too many mouths to feed.
Yeah, I mean,
sorry, I thought he was just talking about Buffalo's receiving core this year. Sorry, I'm back.
Yeah. So, I mean, you've got, like you said, that's first world football problems there to worry about. Are we going to get Odell Beckham the ball? One of the things that I think does not necessarily age as bad with receivers is the ability to run routes and set up corners. And if you watch Beckham's film from last year, he can still run crisp routes. He can still set up corners. There's a touchdown play he had where he has a double move on a guy, and he has to fall into the end zone because it's an underthrown ball. But I mean, it's just a beautiful route. It looks like something a football player in their prime could do. So he may have lost a step. He may not be the threat that we saw early in his career, but he can still run those crisp routes. And if he knows the playbook and he gets in the playbook deep enough, they're going to have stuff where he's going to be wide open. It would not, I mean, it's like last year. I think it was the Washington game. It was the third down pass early in the game for a touchdown. Tua hits a Hill for a long touchdown pass. Devon Achane was on the other side, wide open. Tua had two options on that play, Hill or Achane for touchdowns. So, you know, and I'm sure some Tua hater out there is like, well, he missed an open guy. Well, they were both open. And I think we're going to see lots of tape this year of this offense where there's multiple guys open. Well, I mean, yeah, but everybody was hurt.
Cap for Life is bringing up that he's heard the same thing last season, that this is the best offense ever assembled on paper.
Well, we only have the off season to go off of right now. It's not like they're playing games right now that we could say these things. Paper's all we got right now.
That's the thing.
And you've added a guy like Beckham who can play outside. He's a possession receiver that you can get that if you need, you know, it's 3rd and 6 and you have to make that play. He's the guy that's going to get that. And you, even at this stage in his career, you could trust him to get that play. You also brought in Jalen Wright, and he's 5'11", 210 pounds, runs 4.3 speed. He's probably the slowest guy in the running back room of the top 3 guys, which is crazy. But he's a guy that, if you watch some of his tape, he runs with power. I mean, he's like a bigger Mostert, and you've got options. I think the problem, honestly, is we need to be in a situation where McDaniel has learned from his mistakes and doesn't get cute. And I was watching the Raiders game the other night, and I have discovered that my television has the NFL app, so I can watch all 22 on my TV. It was a wonderful moment. But they ran the 4th down play on the goal line it was a screen pass to Hill, and he gets dropped for a loss. I'm like, that's the kind of crap that needs to stop. That's where you need to run the ball. And we saw that in the Dallas game. What do they do in the final drive? They got the ball in Jeff Wilson's hands, and he plows through for a first down, and that ended the game. And so I think he needs to learn from his mistakes and stop getting cute in the passing game, even if it means Hill doesn't get that target or Beckham or whoever. But you've got that running back room now, and they've added to that. And I don't think, you know, Jalen Wright, I've seen a lot of grades that like, that was a bad pick. You didn't need another running back. Well, no, they did. They need a bigger guy with that same speed. They've got a guy that can do a little bit different things. Oh, and the guy's probably the best pass protecting back in the entire draft. So, you know, anybody can win the offseason, and we remember that, right? You know, 2013, the Dolphins won the offseason. 2014, they won the offseason.
I mean, I would argue we won the offseason pretty well last year too. Like Jalen Ramsey, we added so many pieces.
And what's wild is people were talking about, you know, the cap crunch this year. We signed more guys this year than we did last year. And
we didn't hurt our compensatory picks.
It didn't hurt the comp picks. So, again, it's got to be played out on paper, but I think we've got a team now that you can win in a variety of ways. And if it is a situation where we're playing San Francisco, for example, and they're going to take away Hill and they're going to take away Waddle, your next option instead of Ced Wilson or Braxton Berrios is now Odell Beckham. Like Eric said, that's champagne problems. Like your next best guy is a guy who would be number one. Yeah, exactly. Your next best guy is a guy that could probably be number one on a couple of teams. So Good stuff there. I'm with Chad in that I think the guard room needs a little bit of work. But I was looking at the draft. You know how many guards or interior offensive linemen went in the first 2 rounds?
Maybe
I think it was
2,
just the
3.
one, right? Graham Barton.
3.
Okay.
Graham Barton went in the first.
Oh yeah,
Jack,
Jackson
Jackson Powers Johnson.
Yeah.
And the guy that went to Pittsburgh, I can't think of his name, Frazier. There were 4 that went in the 3rd round, and that was it. So the interior offensive line, they got paid in free agency, but nobody really wanted to draft these guys. And I don't want to get back into draft talk, but I don't really necessarily fault Chris Greer for taking a chance on somebody like Patrick Paul versus going with an interior offensive line because of the positional value.
But don't get me started on Patrick Paul again, bro.
But like I said, I don't want to get into that aspect of it. But I think they're going to add a guy on June 2nd. Whether it's Greg Van Roten, whether it's Dalton Risner, whether it's who's the guy that they brought in, Phil Haynes.
Phil Haynes,
They brought in Phil Haynes.
They didn't.
Whether it's that guy, they're going to bring in somebody to compete, and they're going to put the best 5 out there. And I think, as a matter of fact, I was looking at it today because I was talking with somebody online about it, and finding offensive line information is, without having to pay for it, is practically impossible. But I did find a site that had Miami as the, I think, 12th best offensive line going into this season, and they listed the starting 5 as Armstead, Wynn, Brewer, Robert Jones, and Austin Jackson. I think you need to upgrade the Robert Jones spot.
And Alf just brought up on the chat again, and Greg Van Roten talking about how he's the best option at right guard. So,
yeah. I think that's been my concern. Is I don't think there's many out there on the market. There are a couple guards right now that are clear upgrades, and maybe they have deals done already, but they just have to wait for the money to clear in June because those guys are still out there. So. Safeties is a need too. I saw Alf was pointing that out, but there's some really good safeties on the market still.
We keep hearing about Quandre Diggs.
Jamal Adams is still on the market.
No thanks. No. I don't want Jamal Adams.
Yeah, but you're talking about your third safety. I'm just saying there's some really
you want to talk about
players.
Locker room cancer, Chad?
Well,
oh my God.
Maybe not him, but all I'm pointing out is there's a lot of talent out there at the safety position where I think there's only a couple names out there right now at guard. That's what I'm worried about because I look at our line right now and the Teron Armstead thing, no. I mean, he's not going to play. I'll be shocked if he plays more than 5 games. The guy's body just physically isn't able to hold up anymore. Anybody that thinks Teron Armstead is going to play many games, I don't know what to tell you at this point. I mean, he's not going to. So your left guard right now is going to be Kendall Lamb with Patrick Paul coming along.
Lamb's not a guard, bro.
Or sorry, your left tackle. I'm sorry, I say guard. I'm just saying Teron Armstead's not going to play many games. You just need to accept that reality right now. I'm just telling everybody that. So that's your left guard. Your left tackle. I mean, your left guard, Isaiah Wynn. I'll be surprised if he plays half the games this season. I mean, I saw him come into camp. He's not in shape. I can tell you right now, he's not. And so he's going to have to get into shape, and his body's going to have to hold up. And so I'm looking at our offensive line being Lamb, Eichenberg, Brewer, Jones, and Jackson right now, and that's not a good front. I'm just selling it to you straight. That's not a good offensive front right now. So I'm high. Maybe you're not, Lewis. I'm high on Patrick Paul. I think he's going to be a decent tackle. I don't think he's ready to step in right now and play it. But
that was my concern, though, Chad. Like again, it's not Patrick Paul, the player, could potentially become a very, very good left tackle. I'm not arguing that. My problem is that you just mentioned it. He can't play right this second. Like they don't
need him to though. You got Lamb. He could play, but Lamb and this is Lamb and Armstead's last year in Miami for sure. Both of those guys are going to retire after this season. So Paul is slated to be the left tackle in 2025. I get that pick because that's an expensive position, and you got to draft it higher, pay it a lot of money, and so it was a value pick in the second round. But I'm just saying, like, we have got to get some, I think, veteran help now. I don't know anything about Driscoll. I do know he's never been a career starter at guard. He's kind of been a backup swing guy. And so is he a lot better than, say, Liam Eichenberg? I don't know. I know Liam Eichenberg played a little better under Butch Berry, but he's never been a great lineman. I mean, you just got to be honest with it. He did an admirable job filling in at center on short notice, but I think Brewer is going to be better in space than the center we've had in quite a few years. If you're talking about, pulling or running sweeps and stuff, but I also don't think he's going to be near as effective at the point. If you bring in a Quinnen Williams, he's just going to blow that guy off the ball and bully him. And so my concern right now is the number one reason I've been pointing out we were losing last year wasn't Tua, it wasn't drops. It's that Mike McDaniel's offense is one of the worst in the NFL at converting short yardage plays. And the offense, to me, has taken a step backwards in that you're telling me you're going to come in on 3rd and 1. I don't think he has any intention on going under center at 3rd and 1 anymore. It's going to be your 3rd and 1 for the Miami Dolphins is going to be about the same success rate of converting a 3rd and 4. It's going to, and you have teams you see like the Philadelphia Eagles, they're doing the tush push, or teams that do the quarterback sneaks. Mike McDaniel doesn't quarterback sneak the ball, and he's not going to quarterback sneak the ball with Tua. He's just not going to risk injuring him. And, Duke pointed out the game we closed out on offense was Jeff Wilson pounding the ball off tackle against Dallas. Are we going to still be able to pound the ball, though, behind Robert Jones? When we're playing Buffalo, we're up 3 points. There's, a minute 30 left and they have 2 timeouts. Are you going to pound the ball behind Robert Jones? Are you going to pound the ball behind Liam Eichenberg? Or are we going to be trying to throw the ball on 3rd and 1 to close the game out? That to me is going to be what this season's going to be about is how Mike, I think I told you a few episodes back, Lewis, I looked it up and we were running like 40% conversion rates on goal to go and 1 yard to go. And that's why I was bringing up the name Lusaka Polite, where I'm like, that guy converted like 41 out of 45 attempts on 1 yard to go downs. We have got to get that number into the 70 or 80% range to close out good teams and win games against good teams. We're not going to beat teams even with our high-powered offense all the time by 14 points and 21 points in those games. Those games come down to 3 points, 7 points with 2 minutes to go, and who can close it out.
I get that.
And don't get cute.
Yep. Speaking of getting cute, we got like 8 minutes left to go before we start put it to a close. The Miami started negotiating with Tua in earnest, apparently. And
he's going to get paid a lot of money, guys. I'm just telling you, it's going to be a monster deal. There's no doubt. As it should. But
so, and also just for any questions about whether or not the deal is going to fall through or not, CK actually brought this up on OnlyFins, which, by the way, it's only $3 a month to get onto OnlyFins. Is that? Let me just double check and make sure this is not considered special news or anything like that. I don't want to run the risk that I say something I'm not supposed to. But essentially, you guys know that Tua has a shoe deal going on with Perry Ellis.
Oh yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
Okay, so that's not special news. Do you know that the Dolphins also have a multi-year partnership with Perry Ellis now?
No, I had no idea on that one. I knew Tua
so,
did. But...
So Tua and the Dolphins both have a deal with Perry Ellis separately. That can't be a coincidence. That seems to indicate that they're going to be hanging with each other for quite some time. So, is this the good news that we've been looking for? For me, it is. I like Tua. I think Tua is going to be. I refuse to believe that this is Tua's ceiling. I still am hanging on to the idea that everything about Tua screams Drew Brees. Everything about his footwork, his mental acuity, even his lack of arm strength. Everything. He is Drew Brees reincarnated, just with a left-handed throw instead. So
he needs to cut down on the small handful of mistakes he makes from time to time, where he misses a guy in the open field and throws that pick two, or gets a little too over-aggressive. And that's the one thing about Odell Beckham, I think that's comforting.
I'll tell you what, dude. Odell Beckham will run a hell of a better route than ever Chase Claypool did. My God.
Well,
that's
we're not
no
yet.
doubt. Yeah.
He's Buffalo's problem now.
Yeah.
So
that's your number 3.
Yeah. So I used to refer to these guys as accuracy erasers. Um, Jarvis Landry was one. We've seen these guys. These are guys that you just have to put the ball in their vicinity and they're going to come down with it. And that's not Hill and that's not Jalen Waddle. As good as those guys are, they're not accuracy erasers. That's not a big problem for Tua, but there are times he gets a little bit off. And if he's throwing that to Odell Beckham, it's still a catch. So that's a positive thing there. And another comment. Robert Jones will be the next hunt.
That comes from Douglas
hey,
Anderson.
Look,
He looked good in the offseason. I see him come into camp and he's in shape. Robert Jones.
I will say this. I think that there is an appreciation for Chris Greer that's missed a little bit in all this when you consider that Robert Hunt, granted he was drafted after, or no, I think Robert Jones was drafted a year after Robert Hunt, but
I don't think Robert Jones was drafted at all.
No, he was a fourth round pick.
Oh, was he really?
Was he?
I never knew that.
Yeah. He was a fourth round pick. And funny enough, you know who his pro comp was on the scouting report I just read?
What's that?
Don't tell me it's
Laken Tomlinson.
Somebody put that in. Somebody put no. He got signed. He got signed. I think.
Okay. So, but I do think
that
there's an aspect here where that we need to kind of acknowledge that, hey, this is a guy that this is kind of the natural succession of things. This is a guy that's gotten better every year that he's been here since he's been drafted. Your current starter went off with a big on a big money deal to Carolina.
Hey, Eric, sorry to interrupt. I just to make sure, I wanted to double check that because I really did not think he was drafted, and I just looked him up. Robert Jones, following the 2021 NFL draft, he was signed with the Dolphins as an undrafted free agent. So you must be thinking of someone else.
I see. I saw a fourth round grade.
Oh, fourth round grade. Okay, got it.
Okay. That's where I had messed up there. My apologies. But again, the point still kind of stands here where there's this natural progression where you have a young player kind of waiting in the wings, developing, getting better every year, as Robert Jones has. Your current starter goes off, and now, granted, I know progression isn't linear, but if there is another step to be taken with a guy like Robert Jones, who is just 25 years old, freshly 25, I might add, there still might be some meat on the bone there where you say, you know what, this is a guy that, yeah, I'm comfortable with this being a start with one of the 32 starters in the league.
I mean, listen, the whole offensive line right now, it feels like, unless they go get Dalton Reisner or they go get Greg Van Roten, which I hope that they're planning on using some of that money and not trying to just roll it over for next year. That would really suck in my mind. Like, if you're going to go all in, go all in. Don't go all in like the Cowboys went all in. Like, not at all. I go get Dalton Risner. He even put it out there. Dalton Risner said that he's not looking to get a massive payday. He just wants a guaranteed starting job. And there is nobody on this roster right now that would stop Risner from getting that. None. Like, he just wants a verbal confirmation that you are the starter and we're signing you to be the starter. If we need to just play into his ego and be like, you're the starter, fine, whatever. If he ends up sucking, you bench him and he gets pissed off about that, oh well. Like, play well and we won't bench you. That's kind of how it goes.
I'll say this. We've been through some bad offensive line coaches. Nobody can disagree with that, right? I mean, we've had some terrible offensive line coaches. Butch Berry's done a pretty good job the last season. He did a phenomenal job, I thought, with what he had to work with.
And that was my next point, was that, like, I get we're just leaning into the magic of Butch Berry. At some point, you have to go for better talent.
My point is, I think his voice carries a fair amount of weight in the personnel department right now when it comes to the offensive line. And so I think Mike McDaniel is probably going to Butch Berry and saying, who do you want? And if he wants Dalton Risner or Reisner, is it Risner? I'm not even sure how to say it.
I'm not sure anymore. I'll look it up later.
If he coached him for a full year. Remember, he was in Denver with that guy for a year, so he knows him very well. I'm sure of what he is, his strengths and weaknesses are. I would think if he says, I really want that guy, Chris Greer is just going to go get it done. I mean, because you're not talking about a guy who wants $10 million a year. He signed for $4 million last year with Minnesota. So I would think $5 million would get him done immediately. Would bring him to your team. So if they want him and Butch Berry wants him, I would think they're going to go get him. And so I'm under the impression maybe he doesn't want him. I don't know right now, but
there's no money to sign him anyway.
Yeah, but I mean, maybe they're just waiting. That was my whole frustration with the Odell signing was I'm like, why didn't you just go get him and then worry about your receiver in June, because you have a pretty good receiver room without Odell. But granted, he makes.
I think the dominoes are starting to fall with those wide receivers, though. Chad,
yeah, that's true. That's fair.
Because Zay Jones is going to go on a visit to the Cardinals, I think, after he got released from the Jaguars. Tyler Boyd just signed with Tennessee,
right?
So he's not. If we're here, if the news is correct, and we're hearing that he got bigger offers from Buffalo and Kansas City, he's not going to wait around for the Dolphins.
That's
so
fair.
You had to sign him.
So maybe, like I said, there's something already in place that, because I think you can talk to those guys. They're not with another team. It's not tampering to talk to like their agent right now and say, here's what we're going to give you, but we can't.
No, by now there's no tampering. That's done.
There's no we can't formally announce it though until after June when we have the cap space. Then we'll do it. Maybe that's what's going on. If we get, either one of those guys, just a veteran guard. I realize that neither one of those guys are Pro Bowl guards that are going to dominate, are going to be better probably than Robert Hunt. But I do feel like I feel a lot better if we have, Dalton Reisner starting at right guard, knowing that he's at least going to be average to above average and competent. I don't know that Robert Jones. Yeah, I know he's only played left, but I would grab him. I mean, I don't know how easily Isaiah Wynn could play right. Maybe he can't either.
Don't mess with it. Don't mess with him.
I'm a little nervous. One injury alone, and you're already down to Liam Eichenberg potentially or Driscoll. And we don't have any guards that have ever hardly been anything but backups right now in their career.
Well, the one thing about Greg Van Roten was he signed with the Raiders last year for like $1.5 million or something like that. So he's going to be extraordinarily cheap compared to what Risner would bring.
And he would help Austin Jackson tremendously.
Yeah. And the other thing that I want to mention as far as I found a website today. I don't have it pulled up, but it listed stats for offensive linemen. And I looked up Liam Eichenberg because he's the whipping boy right now, right? He's the guy that like, oh gosh, we're starting Liam Eichenberg. He had 20, I think, 22, as they referred to it as blown blocks, which were blocks where they basically lost the rep. He had 14 blown pass blocks, 8 blown run blocks. He had 4 blown run blocks in backup duty against Denver, his first game ever at center. He had 5 blown pass blocks the next game against Buffalo, which was his first start at center. After that, he had 9 blown pass blocks and 4 blown run blocks all season long, according to this site. So as bad as we like to pick on Liam Eichenberg, he did not play as poorly as you think. And so I just looked up another center. I looked up Creed Humphrey, right? Because he was the guy that they should have drafted instead of Liam Eichenberg. He had 8 blown run blocks as well all season long, and he's a natural center. So to your point, Chad, about Butch Berry, it's the fact that Butch Berry is still here. This is the first consecutive offensive line coach we've had since Chris Forrester, before he started doing got into his issues, and then before
I was going to go far as back as John Benton.
It was John Benton, but then he was there. He was here initially to start the season, and then all that happened, and then he left. So it's the continuity there with the offensive line that I think that he can develop these guys and they can get comfortable in a system. So I know that's putting a lot on one guy, but look, we've seen Dante Scarnecchia.
Yeah, I was about to bring him up. Like one guy makes all the difference.
He was with the Patriots in the 90s as an offensive line coach. And the only time he took a break was he retired for a couple of years and then came back.
And then Brady called him back here, get your ass back over here because my guys are falling like flies.
So I think, and you mentioned, Chad, with him, not only him having a voice in the room, but Frank Smith, the offensive coordinator, is an offensive line guy too. So they have those guys. And it's kind of like Anthony Weaver, a defensive coordinator. He was a defensive line coach. They didn't draft one of those guys either. So if they're comfortable with who they got, they're like, hey, I can make this work. Maybe that's hubris, or maybe they know what they're doing.
Maybe.
Yeah, I hope so. I just last year, I don't know how many games Lester Cotton started, and I'm not here to rip on Lester Cotton, but
he played more snaps than anybody.
I mean,
okay.
and I don't want to be back there again, and especially into the second half of the season, and that's why I'm hoping that that's the plan after June is to get an able body. That's all.
Listen,
that's
I will say this:
he was third in snaps behind Eichenberg and Jackson.
Oh, third. Okay, well, that's too many. That's still too many. But I would think that with these super geniuses at offensive line coaches, they have to know Lester Cotton doesn't fit the scheme. They just have to. They're going to keep him around.
I don't think they had anybody else. I mean, they didn't have a choice. They're
going to keep him around. They'll give him the lip service. We'll let you compete. We'll see what we can do. Maybe they'll stash him on the practice squad as a vested veteran because they can do that now. But I don't want him being the first option as a backup. I just don't. Please,
I think I'm scarred. I don't know. If you guys realized last year, Buffalo's starting line played their whole year. The starting five, the whole season.
That was very annoying. It's
I feel like with us, with the Dolphins, every year you assume you're going to lose 3 of your offensive linemen by the middle of the season, and they're going to be done. It just seems to happen. I don't know why, but it does.
Well, and it doesn't help that you've got 2 guys that are starters that are guys you expect to miss time. So even if you pencil in Armstead and Wynn as your starters right now, they're missing time. Mm-hmm. It's just going to happen. So you've got to have that depth there. So, that's where I think you get into, and let's be fair about it. The season before, Connor Williams played every snap for the Dolphins. Robert Hunt played all but 1 snap for all season long. And then this past year, they missed half the season. They played less than 50% of the snaps. So,
any given season.
You weren't expecting those guys to fall off, right? You were expecting the guys that did to miss time, not those guys. So it was just really, really, really bad last year. So here's hoping that we get a full season from the majority of the offensive line and it stays intact.
And here's hoping that the money they'll get from the eventual Tua extension to go sign Greg Van Roten. All right. We're going to be done here now. Everybody, thank you all so much for joining us. It is always, as always, we appreciate everything that you guys have to say in the comments. Just going off a last few of them. Lo-Fi Anime NFT. Don't forget Tua in December. Does his arm gas out by then? He's working on that. He's trying to retune his mechanics. So hopefully that doesn't happen again. So
run the ball.
Run the ball. That would help a lot, wouldn't it? I said it on a pregame show with Ethan last season. It's it doesn't seem like Mike McDaniel is staying committed to the run game like he promised. But hopefully, maybe the third year's the charm. Maybe third time's the charm. Maybe he'll finally learn his lesson. So,
they went from 30th or 31st in attempts to 15th in attempts. So there was an improvement. But yeah, just December and January football is running the football.
Yeah, just run the ball.
Again, hopefully, now, we're hopeful that they have enough depth in the running back room that, you're not having to go with who
was it? Eric, no, I'm not.
I wasn't. Here's me. If you're up 14 points in the second half and it's 2nd and 2, pound the rock. That's what I say. 2nd and 2 when you're up 14 isn't let's throw a 25-yard out. And unfortunately with Mike McDaniel, let's throw a 25-yard out. That's just how.
That's why I was I get the injuries to the running back room, but I'm not giving him that out. It's there were plenty of times he could have safely ran the football.
No. That's not what I'm saying. There's no excuses this year, even more so because of what you have in the running back room.
Agree 100%.
All right. We're calling it here. Make sure you go to OnlyFins. It's onlyfins.gg. It's discord.gg/onlyfins to be able to get there. It's only $3 a month to get the best Dolphins talk in the NFL. Also, make sure you go to prizepicks.com. Use the promo code 5. That's FIVE. They'll match up to $100 on your deposit when you sign up. And yes, you can do it in Florida all over again. And of course, Jersey 305. Get 10% off your discount. 10% discount when you use the promo code 5 when you make your purchase. Classic jerseys all around. You can probably get the jerseys of some of the guys back there on Chad's Dolphins wall there.
My memorabilia.
Yep. All right.
Memorabilia.
Ladies and gentlemen, we will see you all next week. It has been quite fun, and we'll see what happens next. Maybe the Dolphins will go ahead and find a way. Good night, everybody.
Take care.